This is a vlog of my short trip of 2 days to Vietnam, and more specifically to Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City as it is known. So, this trip was a short trip, detour on my trip to India in October 2019. As usual, I started off from the city of Toronto with a short transit in Tokyo, Narita. During my short layover in Narita airport, on my way to my gate, I happened to notice how empty the walkway was, and I often judge the quality of the airport by how noisy or how functional or dysfunctional the walkways are. I think the walkway at the Narita airport was the quietest and the smoothest I have ever seen in any other airport in the world. Vietnam is a Southeast Asian country, and Saigon lies in the southern part of Vietnam. Saigon is by far the largest city in Vietnam with a population of over 13 million people. And the only logical way to get around this massive city is on scooters. On the first day of the trip, I chose an organized tour, a half a day tour to the Kuchi tunnels for about $15 or about 700 Indian rupees. It included transport and the entrance fee to the Kuchi tunnels. I came to this touristy area called Bu Vien, and I was impressed to find hundreds of tourists waiting for their respective tours.
You can have a look in the front of the bus, Benton Market. You can assume this is a central market, the French built in French colonial. Next by Benton Market, you will see the coffee bean, coffee shop.
At the entrance of the Kuchi tunnels, there were some old American military hardware that was used in the Vietnam War. Stuff like tanks, the B 52 bomber, and the helicopter. The helicopter is pretty much the symbol of the Vietnam War. Several thousands of them were used, several hundreds or even millions of sorties. I'm sure they have been instrumental in the lot of pain during war times, death and destruction during war times. It was kind of surreal to be able to get into one of these machines and see how the pilot would have seen the outside world during those times. Next up, it was time to follow our tour guide into the forest to visit the Kuchi tunnels. Kuchi tunnels were mostly hand dug by the Vietnamese resistance fighters or the Viet Cong, as they were called. Uh, these tunnels are about several hundred kilometers in length, crisscrossing around the Ho Chi Minh City in this area called Kuchi. These tunnels formed a part of this vast network of tunnels and paths through the jungle all the way from Hanoi to Saigon, which a distance of several hundred kilometers, which is referred to as the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
And they dig tunnel with the team three guys, one underground, digging, digging, collect the soil to the basket. They dig the well. Depend on level. We got 3 meter deep, 6 or maybe 8 meter deep. They dig the well. After done the well, the man on the ground will put up the basket, transfer for full of soil, transfer for the man behind him, throw away, return the empty for the man keep digging.
Even if we want, we can't fall in it.
Some information for you about the entrance. The entrance make the wood. The entrance make the wood when we step on. No sounds. One tunnel there, very short, very narrow, and small. Original size of the tunnel there.
Wow.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Already know that the U.S. Army, they never let the soldier die alone in the battlefield. They will rescue him by any way they can.
This small hole in the ground is the exit for the smoke from the kitchen. It is quite far away from the tunnels, and by the time it comes out, it is hardly noticeable. This was the way the people were able to hide their cooking during war. All in all, I was very impressed by the Vietnamese war effort. Their frugal engineering was something which I can relate to from India, something known as Jugaad. After visiting the Kuchi tunnels, I went over to a cafe to relax and prepare for my second trip.
Oh, yesterday I did not do anything. I came in the night, so I came late in the night, so I did not do anything.
After relaxing in the cafe, I went on my second trip of the day, which was a street food tour on the back of a motorbike. And I would be taken out on a motorbike by a student who works with this tour company part time. I highly recommending doing one of this. I was so full by the end of this trip.
Same.
As part of this tour, we visited the old apartments built during the communist era. It was raining outside. It was a huge thunderstorm, and it was nice to stay indoors during the rain. Uh, these apartment complexes are quite small. People living pretty much next door to door. Mind you, even though the way they may look shabby, but they are not cheap. They are quite expensive, up to $1,000 in monthly rent. During the communist era, religion was forbidden, worship was forbidden, so people had hidden temples in within these houses. This particular temple is a Buddhist temple within the
Oh, there's a
apartment
temple
complex.
also? I never seen like so many different types of flowers. Yeah, so many varieties.
Next stop, we stopped for this dish, which I don't remember the name, which looked like the South Indian dish of dosa. So I would call this Vietnamese dosa. It was quite tasty, crunchy, and very crispy on the outside, and they have this dipping sauce. It is eaten by packing this crispy stuff within some salad like vegetables that you see on the right here. The next day, I went to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral, which is within District 1, central part of Saigon, along with the post office, which is very close to it. Both of the buildings are built in a very French colonial architecture, reminds me of some of the colonial buildings back home in India. Later in the afternoon, I met up with my friends. It was Jatin's bachelor's party. We waded through a lot of traffic to go through the city, traffic which reminded me of my home city of Bangalore. We went to an amazing restaurant, had great food, uh, experienced a great cafe, and we closed the day with some drinking, bar hopping, and playing some table tennis. On the last day, I had just enough time to squeeze in a visit to the War Remnants Museum before heading to the airport. I was surprisingly very emotional and hurt by looking at all the war atrocities made by American forces in Vietnam. In closing, I have to say that I was really impressed by this city on the Saigon River, Ho Chi Minh City. I was really blown away by the energy of the city. I would definitely revisit this city at least for the fabulous food. Speaking of which, this coconut coffee at the airport really blew me away.